The agenda is set. Hello, everyone. I'm Brent Goff in Berlin. Killing the messenger. Journalist under fire for trying to tell the truth in Egypt. That and more today. It's time to talk. The Egyptian crisis from bad to worse. More journalists are being intimidated, attacked, and killed. Will the real story become another casualty of a country at war with itself? Well, Germany's military mission in Afghanistan is coming to an end. Will this mark the beginning of another nightmare? The pullout has begun. German troops and equipment heading home. By next year, only a few hundred soldiers will remain. Today we ask, is Germany leaving the Afghan people with a mess on their hands? And in one of the greenest places on Earth, the green light has been given to drill for oil. Ecuador says it will open the huge oil reserve under the Yasuni National Park to drilling because the world didn't pay enough. Pay to not drill. Who's to blame and who should be ashamed? Well, I've invited three people today to talk, argue, and pry apart these headlines. My first guest is Ecuador's ambassador to Germany, Mr. Jorge Jurado. He has come with some strong opinions on why the country's pay us to not drill plan did not work. Ambassador, it's good to have you back on the show with us today.
Thank you.
My second guest stirred up a hornet's nest in Germany with his book Under Fire, accusing German military leaders of being incompetent in Afghanistan and politicians right here in Berlin of being cowards. I'm happy to welcome to the show Mark Lindemann. He is a former Bundeswehr intelligence officer who did 2 tours in Afghanistan. Mark, good to have you on the show. And my next guest says that the dangers for journalists in Egypt have skyrocketed in the last month. Accusations of journalists being foreign spies are now par for the course. I'm happy to welcome to the show the freelance journalist Nuria Tessan. She has spent the past 4 years reporting from Cairo. She knows how things are on the ground there right now. They certainly aren't good. Nuria, would you say that the truth is becoming a casualty of this conflict?
Definitely.
Who's telling the truth?
Journalists are trying to tell the truth, but not in the country. We cannot believe the army. We cannot believe the civilians. We cannot believe the brotherhood. They have been lying all the time. The army, first of all, they told the people that they were going to follow the willing of the people. They told them they were going to give the security back into the streets, and they failed. They lied the people in the streets. The civilians are accusing Muslim Brotherhood of being terrorists. This is not true, totally true at least. And Muslim Brotherhoods are telling that they are under threat and they are being attacked only for being Muslim Brotherhood, and it's not true also. Okay,
so it sounds like we've got half-truths being told by everyone here. Let me ask the 2 gentlemen here at the table as well. When the world looks at what's happening in Egypt right now, do they think they're getting a true picture? Ambassador, what do you think?
It's quite difficult. It's quite difficult because there are too many positions and too many ideas about what's really going on from outside. I think it's very, very difficult to get a true picture of what's going on there.
Do you agree, Mark?
Yes, I think it's almost impossible to get a true picture. But what you have to do as a foreign country, as Germany, for example, you have to decide somehow on which side maybe you want to be. And even if you not know the truth at all.
Okay, I mean, a country may decide which side it wants to be on, but a journalist is not supposed to do that, right? I mean, a journalist is supposed to be fair and objective. Is it possible to do that right now in Egypt?
I think it's possible. There's always a possibility to be honest. I don't think it's the word is being objective. But as a journalist, you have the duty of being honest. And I think journalists in the streets, they are trying to be honest, even if they are under threat, even if the government itself is sending them letters. Like a few days ago, they did sending us a letter saying that we have to be very careful with information. Yeah, this is true.
Okay, what was in the letter?
In the letter, they were saying that we were making mistakes, we were being blessed, we were not giving the truth completely, but they are not letting us to do our work properly. So it's impossible. If they want us to tell the truth completely, they have to be transparent, and they are not.
They're telling you that you're being biased, and that was coming from the interim government, which obviously is the military.
Yeah, of course. Yeah,
Okay.
they sent us a letter. They say that, as I explained you, that we are not covering the news objectively. We are not being honest. We are only covering the side of the Brotherhood and talking about the massacres, but we are not talking about how they are fighting terrorism in the streets. And they ask specifically that we should cover the other side. But it's almost impossible to be in the side of the army because we are being shot in the streets.
Okay, I'm going to talk a little bit more about what it's like for you on the ground in just a second. I want to read a quote to you that was published just recently. Not even under Hosni Mubarak did we see this many attacks against journalists. Now, those are some disturbing words about Egypt just a few days ago from the Committee to Protect Journalists in the Middle East and North Africa. Press intimidation has been a staple of political life in Egypt for decades, but in recent weeks, the number of arrests, attacks, and orders to shut down operations, they've all mushroomed in a crisis that makes reporting the truth a gamble that can have fatal consequences.
Amid the unrest in Egypt, another important battle is being fought to control the message being put out by the media. Egypt's military has slammed domestic and international news outlets for failing to portray events as part of a war against terrorism. Egyptian state television has insisted that the Muslim Brotherhood started the violence to provoke the military. Supporters of ousted Mohamed Morsi say domestic media has been cowed by the new military rulers, and journalists in the front line of the battle for truth are becoming targets themselves, making the task of finding the right balance increasingly difficult.
Nuria, have you been the target of violence?
Yeah.
Tell us about what it's like.
It is difficult. As correspondents, everybody is being intimidated in the streets. Nobody allowed us to record in certain places. For sure, the Brotherhood want to show the dead people. They want us to show us the massacres and the people, the dead bodies inside the mosque. But the army doesn't want us to record while they are shooting. It was the same 2.5 years ago during the revolution. They had snipers, and they don't want us to record that they have snipers, because this is a proof that they are committing these crimes against human rights. So they don't want us to record. But also in the streets, it's very difficult when you are trying to talk to the people, because during 2.5 years, they have been intoxicating against journalists and against foreigners. They told
The military?
Not
or
the military,
the Muslim Brotherhood?
In a way, you know, because after the revolution, after the 25th revolution, what we call revolution in 2011, in January and February, after that, they were ruling the country for over a year, until Morsi arrived into the government.
Right.
And they were publishing advertisements against foreigners, like, for example, a foreigner in a coffee shop with a BlackBerry talking to a local, and then he was explaining something, and he was tweeting or saying something just to tell to the Western countries what is going on. So they call us spies, they call us like the black hand behind all these problems. It's supposed that we are like intoxicating in the country, and we are threatening the country.
Yeah, you're threatening the country, scapegoat. Ambassador, what's the view from South America about what's happening as far as reporting is concerned? Is there more, do you rely more on what the military says, or is there a tendency to believe what the Muslim Brotherhood is saying?
Well, first of all, I think that the situation is so difficult that we are, for example, Ecuador was calling back his ambassador, our ambassador in Egypt, to discuss the situation in Egypt. For us, it's impossible to accept those kinds of massacres. And I think it's for us difficult to know who is saying the truth. But for the first instance, for Ecuador, for example, for us it's impossible to accept that the government is choosing to kill his own people in order to maintain some kind of order.
For Ecuador, when you look at Egypt, do you accept the legitimacy of the military-backed government now, or do you want the government of President Morsi reinstated?
We didn't have right now an opinion about this. We were against any kind of coup d'etat. And
but are you calling what happened on July 3rd a coup d'etat?
Yes, and this was one, and we are against it. We choose the way that every country has the right to have his own decisions, and the people have the right to have all the sovereignty to decide about their future. So this is our politics.
This is what I don't understand. You've got journalists on the ground reporting about what basically was a coup, and yet governments have not stopped diplomatic relations with Egypt yet, and yet they're saying that a coup did take place. Why is there this reluctance to break off diplomatic relations and to say we will not accept what the military is doing?
Well, the first step for us was to call him back our ambassador. Now we will see if the ambassador is going back to Egypt or not, or we are making some other strong situations about Egypt. Mm-hmm. This is on our Ministry for Foreign Affairs.
Mark,
decision.
Is the international community giving Egypt, a free ride here?
I don't think so, but the question is, what can we do? Pulling back an ambassador, for example, is a strong sign of doing something. But what then? The military government, the current government is not impressed by doing so, I'm guessing. Take another example. Take the example of refusing giving money to the Egypt government. So yesterday there was a note that Saudi Arabia and I guess Qatar and Kuwait, not Qatar is wrong, but Kuwait and the Emirates.
And the Emirates, yes.
And the Emirates were paying these money.
Well, they say that they're going to pick up the slack if the European Union, if the United States, if they cut off aid.
Right. So what else can we do? Yeah.
But as a journalist, when you hear that, isn't that an endorsement of what's going on right now?
Yeah.
They say, we'll keep giving you the money, continue shooting people.
Yeah, because the problem is that they don't want the Muslim Brotherhood ruling the country. As you say, they don't care. They have the weapons, they have the money, which is coming from the oil, from the Arabic Peninsula. So they have everything. They can keep on shooting people. And also they have the supporting of the people inside the country. This is the most important. We were talking about the intoxication of the media against foreigners. But the people in the streets, they were suffering with the Brotherhood because they don't like them.
And you were too. I mean, the Committee to Protect Journalists says it has documented at least 78 assaults on journalists in Egypt from August 2012 until July 3rd of this year, until Morsi was deposed. So while the Muslim Brotherhood was in power, being a journalist in Egypt was a dangerous proposition.
Being a journalist in Egypt was always difficult and always dangerous. A year ago or a year and a half ago, the same committee said that Tahrir was one of the most dangerous places to cover news. For journalists, it's almost impossible to cover the truth everywhere in Egypt. It's very difficult. They are trying to hide information, but also they are intimidating us all the time.
All right, talk to me a little bit about being a woman and a journalist in Cairo.
This is a plus.
It's a plus.
This is a plus,
okay, well, you're going to have to enlighten us there because we're reading all the time that women are, special victims, that they're being attacked extra by lots of men on the streets in Tahrir Square.
I'm very concerned about the situation in Egypt for women in general. 99.3% of women in Egypt, any kind of woman, is being harassed every day. And this is not my figure, it's the figure from the UN Women. I mean, and as a correspondent, I'm not an exception. I'm a woman. I'm living in Egypt. I'm working in the streets, but also I'm going to situations where a lot of people, a huge amount of people, is gathering, like demonstrations or where protesters are mainly male.
To talk to me a little bit, I know we were talking earlier. You have your husband with you lots of the time when you're there. Are you safer because you have a man on your side on the streets in Cairo?
No, I'm not. I mean, as a correspondent, I've been covering news everywhere, even in Libya alone, with no man beside me. And it doesn't make a difference. The problem is that when there's some harassment...
Why is it a plus being a woman, though? That's what I'm trying to understand, because it's a dangerous place for women.
I was being ironic.
Okay, okay.
This is a plus. You are being harassed and you are being intimidated for being a correspondent, for being a journalist, for trying to tell the truth. But you have a plus when you are a woman, because it's much more difficult, because they can harass you in other way. They can speak very bad to you in a very bad way. They can try to touch you. They can try to put you aside, like in a not very nice way, you know. So it's and also when you are getting harassed, if you are going to cover news, you get afraid. I mean, they are using this as a weapon to, but not only now with the army, before with the Brotherhood, they used to do it, and also with Mubarak, it was a weapon itself. The harassment, was a weapon to try to avoid women to attend the demonstration.
So it feels like it did back in the days of Hosni Mubarak. That's what you're telling us.
I think it's even worse.
It's even worse.
It doesn't stop with the Brotherhood. There was a lot of harassment against women, against journalists during the Morsi time. I think in first month of the running of Morsi, there was like 50 times more arrests of journalists than in 30 years with Mubarak, for example.
Okay. So yeah, I mean, so it depends on the numbers you look at. Ambassador, is the international community putting too much emphasis on the importance of Egypt in the Middle East now? Are we looking at this country with a cautious eye that is misdirected?
What are you meaning with the international community? Is the international community, for example, just the European opinion? Or is for you the international community the Latin American opinion and the Asian and African opinion, for example?
Well, what does the South American world want to see happen in Egypt? Let's put it that way then.
I think that we want to see that the Egyptian and the Arab people are going to have their own decisions by their own, and they have enough sovereignty to make their own future, like the same that we have done in the last 10 years, at least in Latin America.
Is there an outcome that you think is more favorable? That's what I'm wondering. Would you rather see the Muslim Brotherhood back in power, or would you rather see the military pushing through?
It's very difficult to look at that, because in this way, because there are many things that have been changed so fastly in the last 2 or 3 years there. But if you look after the last 60 years in Egypt, for example, there always have been dictatorships or very, very strong governments. They didn't respect or have nothing to do with what we call Western democracy. And for that reason, if you analyze this, I think you have to have another point of view and another possibility to understand what is really going there. For that reason, we don't want that anybody, for example, is going inside of another country to try to push them in one way.
And you
but
don't think
normally, this can be a disaster. For example, we have the example of the United States intervention in Iraq.
Okay, I'm going to have to move on, Ambassador. My producer's screaming in my ear here. Nira, before we move on, though, when are you going back to Egypt?
As soon as possible. I don't know, it depends of the situation there. If things calm down, I will try to have a rest, because I'm exhausted. After 2 years and a half, it's not only this last month and a half, it's 2 years and a half of violence and pressure and work. So I will try to take a week or 2 of holidays, and then
good.
I will go back.
I'm sure you deserve your holidays. Well, listen, we're going to have to move on, but if you want to keep the conversation going, feel free to write to us on Facebook, or you can tweet me. You see the address right there, Brent Goff TV. Let us know what you think should be happening in Egypt and who you think is telling the truth in Egypt. All right, now to a story that it seems, well, no one is rushing to tell. The German military is leaving Afghanistan after 11 years of patrolling the north of the country, helping to train local police and soldiers, build schools and roads. Germany is on schedule to become a fixture of Afghan history. By next year, all but a few hundred Bundeswehr soldiers will be gone. Well, you won't find many political leaders here talking about any of that right now. Germans go to the polls next month, and Afghanistan is a non-starter on the campaign trail. And you won't read much about the pullout either. It's as if no one wants to take notice. Well, today we ask, Has Germany fulfilled its mission? What exactly are German soldiers leaving behind? And is this a mission that Germany would like to quietly forget?
Germany has marked the start of the pullout of its military forces from Afghanistan. Aside from fighting Taliban militants and providing security, there was also a humanitarian aspect to Germany's involvement in the country. One of the reasons foreign troops were sent in the first place was to assist the development of Afghan society. But despite all the aid that has flowed into Afghanistan since the invasion, the country remains desperately poor. There have been achievements, though. Millions more girls now receive an education than under the Taliban. But with much more to be done, will the German withdrawal leave Afghanistan in the lurch?
What do you think is happening, Mark? Is that what Germany is doing, leaving Afghanistan in the lurch?
In my opinion, yeah, they're leaving too fast. On the other hand, I can understand why they are leaving, because there's no success to gain anymore. I'm pretty convinced, but nevertheless, it's too early, and the mission is not fulfilled.
Okay, what has gone wrong? You've been there twice as a soldier. You've been there also as an embedded journalist. Yeah. What has gone wrong?
Well, I think it's mentioned in your trailer as well. You said one of the first goals was to build a society, to rebuild the country. It was not. It was to make sure that there aren't any safe haven for terrorist camps in Afghanistan. That was the goal, and that was also the goal for the German government. But pretty soon after being deployed over there, they started to communicate the other way. They said, we want to rebuild the country. We want to create an open society.
Who started to change the message?
Well,
the Afghans or ISAF?
ISAF plus included the German government. Because, I mean, in a political way, I could understand this because Germans don't want to go to war.
Yeah, because that was really never the message that German politicians gave the voters, was it? I mean, the Americans said we're going in to smoke out the terrorists.
Right.
But in Germany, the discourse was we're going in to help rebuild a shattered state.
I mean, maybe
isn't that what you were sent in to do?
Right. Well, these are two opinions. The one is we're going to war. The other is we are rebuilding a country. Maybe you can combine both goals with another. But in my opinion, you have to do the first, going at war and somehow win the war first, and then rebuild the country.
All right. Let's pick up on that, Ambassador. Is Germany leaving a loser?
It's a quite difficult question for a diplomat in Germany.
You can tell the truth on this show, Ambassador.
But I think there's always a lot of difficulties when one country is going inside of another. And I have heard right now that there are missions that are not being fulfilled, that maybe the time to go out is too early. So I think there will be some difficulties.
Let me pin you down on this. What would Ecuador like to see Germany do right now? Stay longer or get out on schedule?
I think the same case as before. We would be very happy to see that the Afghan people are trying to look after their own future by their own. This is a principle that it means, and we are defending it all over the world.
Does anybody at this table believe the Afghan people are equipped right now to take care of their future? Maria?
No, of course not. I think we failed on almost everything. We made some improvements. You know it better probably. But Afghanistan is not ready to go ahead alone. We cannot just give up and go back home. Our troops are coming back home also in Spain, and we are withdrawing. And I think it's a big mistake. Okay, we took care of the security. We were training an army and police, but we didn't take care of the warlords. We didn't take care of the human rights, and we didn't take care of women's rights. So there's a lot to do, and I don't think they are ready for it.
Yeah.
Yeah, but we are now placing this kind of questions because there is a time that armies are going out of the country. But why we didn't ask some questions before to go inside? This is what I really mean with to look more deeply inside that.
So in other words,
before the countries that were involved in Afghanistan were discussing what will be. I think history is showing us a lot of examples that normally those kind of interventions, with the best wishes, they are going inside. Normally, they ended in a disaster for the country itself.
You agree, Mark?
Yeah, if I got the today's perspective, maybe it's like this. But you ask why we didn't ask questions when going into the country. I think there wasn't any questions to ask. It was crystal clear. The United States of America were attacked by terrorists coming from Afghanistan. Well, not Afghans, but they were placed in Afghanistan. And this was a moral right, plus the right which was also given by the UN to intervene over there. And then something happened. They switched the goals of the mission. And maybe that is a problem.
Who is they, though? Who switched?
Well, all of them.
Because I'm trying to figure out, I mean, you know this. I mean, you were a soldier. The Germans never went in to do combat. They went in to help.
Yeah.
Exactly. They went in to help with soft power duties, right?
Yeah.
So isn't that in itself part of changing the mission? They're not going in to fight terrorists. They're going in to build roads and schools.
I mean, if it's not necessary to fight terrorists in a part of a country like it wasn't in northern Afghanistan in the early years, you can do other things. You can build roads, drill wells, build girls' schools, whatever. I wish they did more, by the way. But if there is an uprise of the insurgent a movement like it was in 2000, let's say 6, 7, you have to go to combat. You have to fight them.
Did your superiors lie to you? I mean, you've said there was a lot of incompetence on the ground in Afghanistan. Were they telling you, the soldiers, the truth about what your mission was?
In general, no. They were not lying, because military leaders know what they are facing. In general, I mean, they are always exceptions.
All right, were the politicians in Berlin lying to you?
More or less, yes, more or less. They were telling us and the whole population of Germany the story of rebuilding a country. That was the story, and those were the pictures delivered here in Germany by the media.
Should Angela Merkel and her coalition, should they be kicked out of power because of these lies?
No, because they aren't the only responsible for that. I mean, if we remember which government, I'm not a fan of blaming former governments, but
right.
It was the Gerhard Schröder coalition. Which
okay, but they're out of power now.
Right. So then the other, both of them, the blacks and the SPD took over power. Yes. And they continued telling not the truth about Afghanistan. And then it was former Secretary of Defense Gutenberg who was the first one who was saying, okay, we are in a kind of war. He didn't say, okay, we are at war, but...
Yeah, but they have been supporting these lies for 10 years, for over 10 years now.
Right, all of them, Nobody, and you ask if they didn't know it, or if they just played kind of theater. I think it's the last one. They played a theater, and I know pretty well that politicians in Germany know the truth and knew it before.
So go ahead.
Do you mean that they know what they are leaving behind? They know that what they are leaving is a mess, and they are still doing it?
Absolutely. Absolutely, because, I mean, there are lots of reports. Me, myself, I wrote those reports about the situation, about the security situation in those years. My first time was in 2005, second tour in 2008, 2009. We wrote it almost every day, and not only me, but all branches in charge of mentoring the security situation.
So what's going to happen now? I mean, we're running out of time. We've got to move on. But are we looking at a situation in Afghanistan where the soldiers left behind, are the politicians leaving those soldiers there to negotiate with the Taliban?
Yeah. I mean, in general, negotiations about a war or to come to an end of the war, is absolutely necessary. If you're not willing to negotiate, then the only alternative is the endless war. But if you go to negotiations with the Taliban, you have to think about what is to be discussed.
Yeah, let me just ask the ambassador before we move on. Ambassador, how would you negotiate with the Taliban? Would you look for a Taliban light version?
First of all, trying to understand what kind of people they are.
We know what kind of people they are.
Yes,
for example, they wouldn't let her sit at the table with us.
Yes, I know it too, but are we going deep enough in their culture, in their traditions, in their way of thinking? Are we going just deep enough, or we are just looking as a kind of a simple, superficial point of view?
Well, let me ask,
I'm not sure about this.
Nuria, let me ask the woman at the table here. Should we be talking with the Taliban now? I mean, they have been talking, but is that what's going to happen? Yeah.
I think they have to, but I don't think they can. I don't think they are.
But it's bad news for women either way, right?
Yeah, of course, because they are not going to do anything good for women. And the scenario that I see in the future, I mean, I don't need a crystal ball. We know that all the improvements that we showed during the last year, if there was some, will disappear for women, for in human rights in general, because it's not only about the Taliban, but also about the warlords that are ruling the country. Yep. We have to know that in the parliament, they are still seated, these men that we saw fighting in the 80s, and they are still there controlling the opium growing.
All right, we're going to have to wrap it up there. We have to move on. Remember, if you want to continue the conversation, you can tweet me and let you know if you agree that Germany is leaving a mess behind in Afghanistan. All right, let's move to South America. Ecuador, a small country in South America, sits on a huge oil reserve valued at more than $6 billion. Now, for the past 6 years, Ecuador's president, Rafael Correa, has asked the international community to help him resist the temptation of tapping that reserve. Pay us and we won't drill. That has been the motto. Well, Correa wanted $3.6 billion. In return, a promise to leave the pristine rainforest untouched. But he didn't get the money he wanted, so now he's announced a change in policy. Ecuador is open for drilling.
The collapse of the Yasuni initiative is a devastating blow to environment campaigners. It's the end of hopes that the plan could be a model for other nations to prioritize biodiversity over the lure of fossil fuels. It's also a major U-turn for the Ecuadorian government.
With great sadness, but absolute responsibility to our people and our history, I've had to take one of the most difficult decisions of my administration.
President Rafael Correa blamed the failure on a lack of international support after the initiative raised just a tiny fraction of the money it needed to go ahead. But are the Ecuadorians just dodging their own responsibility?
Ambassador, isn't that what's going on here? Your country is not taking responsibility for its own natural resources?
No, that's not correct. 2007, President Correa and our government put the initiative on the floor, and it announced at the General Assembly of the United Nations at that time that we are eager to have a project that can be changed, that can change the ways how development is going on, the traditional way of development. Which was this? First of all, that these reserves, these huge oil reserves, 21% of our own reserves in the country, would stay underground forever if we have some kind of compensation. We are looking about political principles, for example, compensation and corresponsibility. Why? Because the countries in the south, like Ecuador, didn't have nothing to do with the global environmental problems like climate change, for example. So we now...
But you now will be part of the group of countries that is polluting the environment.
Well, in a very teeny way. In a very teeny way, because you can compare. You can compare our reserves. They are about 9,000 barrels of oil.
Yeah, it's huge.
With the extraction of oil is being placed in other countries each day. So for that reason, we make this decision, this initiative, in order to have the possibility to develop other places in Ecuador through the money that we would be losing at that time.
If the amount in the reserve is so insignificant, if it's not that big, then why touch it? Why does Ecuador? Why do you have to tap that reserve?
Because we are a developing country. We try to have a better situation, and we have to improve the situation of our people, because we are a poor country. We don't have right now the same situation as industrialized countries, and we are working very hard for it, and we need the money. But we were at that time, we were eager to have a compensation for this step. Which country in the world had the political decision to say, I don't want to develop my own resources in order to protect or to make slower the climate change?
Germany?
To protect the biodiversity, their own resources.
Well, Germany is shutting down its nuclear industry.
That's
expensive as well.
Yeah, that's another thing. But their own resources itself. So for that reason, we were asking for compensation.
Did you have direct talks with the United States, Ambassador?
Just a moment.
Yeah.
And for example, the half of the amount was being put itself by the country, by Ecuador. And we were asking just for the other half, $3.5 billion.
Yeah, I mean, the U.S. buys a lot of oil from you. Did you talk to Washington?
Yes, of course. And Washington was nothing. Well, they said nothing. They were not interested. And for example, China was not interested, and other countries were not interested. Some European countries, they were interested in helping us and in going on with the financiation of this initiative.
But you did get some money. Let me open it up here. I mean, is Ecuador a victim here, or just crying, sour grapes? Nuri, what do you think?
I think everybody has to be responsible for their own resources and also for their own environment. But this is true that this is not a single problem. This is not a problem only for Ecuador. If we are all affected for the disappear or the drill in this Yasuni area, we have to be responsible also for the preservation, for taking care of this area. The problem is that even in our own countries, for example in Spain, we are not being responsible with the environment. We have been sending all the pollution we can to...
Yeah, I know, but what's interesting in this case is Ecuador is saying if the international community does not help us, we are opening up to drilling. So in other words, it's almost like blackmail, Ambassador.
No.
You pay, or either we go in and we pollute just like you did.
We were very transparent in this situation. At 2007, when we were announcing the world about this initiative, at the same time, President Correa told the world, say, if there is some problems that for that the initiative doesn't go very well, we have to choose another possibility, and this will be the drilling of oil. So there was nothing about under the table. There was a transparency, and we have been waiting and working very hard in the last 6 years in order to have the financiation and the help from countries, from enterprises, from people, and so on.
Let me pull in Mark here. Mark, what about the issue of trust here? I mean, Germany didn't want to contribute because they said there was no way that Ecuador could guarantee that this reserve will not be tapped 20 years from now.
Well, I can't say something on that, if there could be a guarantee. But what I must ask myself is, what if the principle like Ecuador is now doing right now, is implemented in other cases too. If Japan, for example, says, okay, we stop hunting whales if you pay us. If other countries ask for money to do nothing immoral, and it is immoral. It's not against the law. It's your country. It's your jungle, or you can go for it. But it's immoral. Otherwise, we wouldn't discuss this item here.
So you're saying what Ecuador is doing right now by opening up for drilling is immoral?
Yes, it is.
I don't agree with that, because this is our own resource, and we are a sovereign country that we have to choose this situation, because we have been waiting for some compensations, for some co-responsibility, and this was nothing about this in the last years.
I agree with you. The world let you down. The world didn't come up with the money that you asked for. I agree. But in your country, are parents going to tell their children, okay, now, beginning in 2013, Ecuador has joined the club of countries that is polluting the environment and making global warming happen. Aren't you now one of the bad guys?
We are one of the guys that are thinking in the future, and we are trying to do the best about it.
But you're going to be drilling. You're as bad as the United States, as you say.
Because we need those resources in order to develop our country. Without those resources, we haven't right now the possibility to be a developed country. But we need to invest in our country to do this.
I suppose that you want, sorry, Ambassador, I suppose that you want this because you want to have a better country for your people. But what about the people, this special population that is living in the Yasuni Park? What about the tribes that are living there? And it's supposed that you have to preserve them because this is your heritage, and it's probably, maybe it's supposed to be most important even than any kind of animal.
Give the ambassador the last word. We have to wrap it up. Ambassador,
well, that's not correct, because the drilling that now is going to take place will be affecting 1,000 part of the Yasuni. So they're not being affected people who are living there.
Okay, we're going to have to wrap it up there. Thank you very much. I'm sure we'll be talking about this again, Ambassador. All three of you, thanks for coming on the show today. That's going to wrap up my agenda this week. Keep the conversation going. Chime in at Facebook and Twitter. You can tweet me at Brent Goff TV. And remember, our inbox is always open at agenda.english@dw.e. And don't forget, you can watch the show again on our website and on YouTube. I'm Brent Goff in Berlin. Join me next time when I set the agenda.